Ash is what was left when I collapsed at work. Burnt out, discarded, the remnants of who I used to be. Iron is who I became after the fire. The self that was forged when the old one couldn't survive. This is Ash and Iron, a podcast for anyone who's been broken by the systems they were told to trust and rebuilt themselves anyway. For the ones who burned out, for the ones who were pushed past their limits, for the ones who were told to be grateful for exhaustion, for the ones who walked through the fire and came out unrecognizable to who they were before. Here, we talk about collapse without shame and transformation without apology. I'm Aiden, and this is the space where we sift through the ash, name what burned, and claim the iron that remains. Welcome to Ash and Iron. Let's begin. You're listening to Ash and Iron, a show about what happens when the systems we trust, the ones built to protect us, support us, guide us, instead turn their weight against us. A show about what breaks and what survives. My name is Aiden, and before I tell you my story, before I talk about the doctor, the insurance company, or the well-known legacy children's publication I worked for, I need to tell you something bigger. Something foundational. Something that explains everything that comes after. Because if I start with the collapse, or the denial, or the resignation, you'll hear it as an isolated event, a moment, a bad day. But it wasn't a moment. It was a pattern. A pattern that existed long before I walked into any doctor's office, long before I filed any claim, long before I ever sat under fluorescent lights in a corporate building trying to hold myself together. So let's start there, with the pattern, with the default. Here it is. When harm happens inside a system, the default response is not to repair it. The default is to minimize it, and then shift the blame onto the person who was hurt. That's the pattern, the blueprint, the operating system. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start noticing it everywhere. In the places you work, in the places you seek help, in the places you're supposed to be safe. And you realize it's not just you. It never was. It goes like this. Something breaks. A person collapses, or burns out, or raises a concern, or asks for help. And instead of the system saying, "What failed here?" it says, "What's wrong with you?" Because if the system admits harm, it has to take responsibility. It has to change. It has to invest. It has to be accountable. Blaming the individual is cheaper, faster, cleaner. And it keeps the machine running. This is the part people don't want to admit. Systems don't protect people. Systems protect themselves. And when you're inside one, you learn that lesson the hard way. Here's the part that stings. When a system shifts blame onto you long enough, you start to believe it. You start thinking, maybe I am the problem. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I am overreacting. But you're not. You're responding to an environment that refuses to acknowledge its own impact. And that's not weakness, that's survival. Because when you're inside a system that minimizes harm, you learn to minimize yourself. You shrink, you adapt, you contort, you endure. And endurance is not the same thing as strength. The cost of this pattern is enormous. People burn out. People get sick. People collapse at work. People lose their sense of self. And then, when they finally reach for help, the system says, "This is your fault." It's not. It never was. But systems are very good at making you believe otherwise. They're good at rewriting the story, good at reframing the narrative, good at turning your pain into your problem. And if you've lived through that long enough, you start to internalize it. You start apologizing for things that were not your fault. You start explaining things that don't need explanation. You start defending yourself against accusations no one should have made. You start living in reaction to harm instead of in pursuit of healing. This pattern shows up everywhere. In healthcare, in insurance, in workplaces, even the ones with smiling mascots and wholesome branding. Different systems, same blueprint. Minimize the harm. Shift the blame. Protect the structure. Add more family-friendly to the branding. The more polished the mission statement, the more wholesome the public image. The more violently the system will defend itself when someone inside gets hurt. Because stakes are higher, the illusion is stronger, the denial is deeper. Why does this happen? Because systems are designed to preserve themselves, not the people inside them. Because accountability is expensive. Because empathy slows things down. Because acknowledging harm creates liability. And because it's easier to call a person difficult than to admit the system is broken. It's easier to say, "You're overreacting," than to say, "We failed you." It's easier to say, "You're not trying hard enough," than to say, "We put too much on your plate." It's easier to say, "You're the problem," than to say, "We need to change." Let's talk about what this actually does to a person. When you're dismissed long enough, you start shrinking yourself to fit the space you're allowed. You stop asking for help. You stop speaking up. You stop believing your own body when it says something is wrong. You learn to endure instead of heal. And endurance is not the same thing as strength. Endurance is what you do when you're trapped. Strength is what you build when you're free. And most people don't realize they're trapped until something breaks. But here's the thing. When you finally step outside the system, when you get distance, when you breathe air that isn't filtered through someone else's expectations, you start to see the truth. It wasn't you. It was never you. You were responding to harm. You were adapting to dysfunction. You were surviving an environment that refused to acknowledge its own impact. And once you see that, you can't go back. You can't unknow it. You can't unfeel it. You can't unsee the pattern. This season, I'm going to walk you through how this pattern played out in my life. Not because my story is unique, but because it's not. You'll hear how a doctor minimized my symptoms, then blamed me for not accepting treatment she never actually offered. You'll hear how an insurance company denied my claim by rewriting the narrative to protect themselves. You'll hear how a workplace ignored warning signs, dismissed concerns, and then got defensive when I collapsed. And you'll hear how every one of those systems followed the same script. minimize, shift, protect the structure. If you've ever felt dismissed, ignored, gaslit, or blamed for your own burnout, this season is for you. If you've ever walked away from a system wondering, was it really that bad or am I just overreacting? This season is for you. If you've ever felt like you were breaking when the truth is that you were being broken by something, this season is for you. This is Ash and Iron. In this season, we're going to talk about what happens when the systems we trust forget that people come first, and what it takes to rebuild yourself after the fire.